Alrighty, here is another quick one. This is actually not so much on how to create those landscapes and mountain scenes, but rather something you might want to do afterwards, which is something I did here. I sort of put a collage together, a presentation with a couple of different renderings and images, and I added text to it. And one in particular, this title here, PD Howler 9.5, I wanted to show how I did that because I think it's interesting to see some of the capabilities of this paint program, not only when it comes to painting and creating 3D views, but also when it comes to creating all sorts of text effects. And so let's dive right into another one of these. Let's say this one here is the rendering we want to use. And maybe we'll format or crop a portion of that first. So let's go to the crop tool. In fact, yeah, let's go do that right there. Let's not waste too much time on that. We'll just select the crop tool roughly around like this. Perhaps make it a little bit smaller. I think this one's originally about 2000 by 2000, so it's a fairly large image. And it will be great for printing. What I'll do is I'll crop to that. And it's still a little bit too big. Let's make it a little bit smaller just for the sake of sanity here. No, it's actually not too bad, but let's see if I go to image resample. We see right now it's 1850 by yada yada. We can work with units here in metric or US units if you want to give it at 300 dpi and you want this to be, let's say, 6 inches wide. You know how many pixels it's going to take and that sort of thing. So you can pick a variety of presets here. I'm going to just say, well, let's not worry about that. We have plenty of pixels here to work with. Let's do actually 1280. 764, why not? Let's keep that. Okay, so here's our image and we're going to title this now. So we're going to put, first of all, take a snapshot and then go right into the text tool. And with the text tool, do something like PD Howler 9.5. There it is. And now we need the font controller here, fonts, F. That will give us some choices for the size, what font we want to use. Let's pick something that's easy to read and work with. There you go, fairly large one. Let's see if we have a bold. Nope, that's already single. Maybe an italic. Couple of different choices you might want to explore here. I don't know. Let's try this one. Yeah, this one is nice. Has the bold look as well. So what I'll do is I'll resize this box so that we have the ability to see everything on it. Maybe I need to zoom out a little bit. With my left shift and control key down, I can use the right button to zoom out and make sure that we have enough on this box so it doesn't clip away part of the text. And then what I'd like to do is actually, you know what, this is a little bit too big. I need it to fit on my frame. There you go. And it's going to be something like that. But maybe I'll want it towards the bottom. Let's put it right there. Okay, now the way to actually fit it there is to go and, you know, there's a couple of places, a couple of ways you can do that. You can choose a color, let's say orange or yellow, yuck, and apply it as plain text right there, apply text. So it's going to put it right there. Right, so that's obviously not very cute. Let's go and show it again, show the text box. It's actually resizing the entire image to see it as is. Since we didn't move the text, it's still on the same place. We can click safely apply text and it applies it there again. Different color, fine. Let's choose a different color like a reddish tone or pink, why not? Magenta. And need to show the text and apply the text. There you go. Alright, so that's one way to work it if you just want that text there as a plain color. But it's not easy to read. The contrast varies, the background varies. So it's a good idea to actually do something beyond just stamping that thing down. Even in black or in white, it would not be easy to see against just any background. See, this one's okay, but if the background had some really dark parts, it would be difficult to read. So one thing I recommend is to show the text at the same location and then actually say you don't want it as plain color in plain text. You want to use either the fill settings or the alpha to actually apply the text, and all it does is it selects it. It renders the alpha into the alpha channel so that that is now selected. Now, so we can go back all the way to where we were before any of that, show the text, use the alpha as alpha, and go there. Another thing you can do, by the way, and you know, I recommend also showing the alpha as an overlay here, so you can see where it is not and where it is selected. But one thing you can also do is actually make it a brush. So when you do show text, you can say make brush. Now you have this thing going into a brush, and if you clear the alpha, maybe it's a little bit easier to see. If you give it more opacity, you see it better yet. And so that's another way to actually then, you know, decide where you want it. But let's go back to that technique with the where is it there, text, and put it onto the alpha, apply it. And so now we have it there, and let's say we need to move it a little bit around. Well, you can use the control key and move it around. So there's a little bit of a positioning capability, but be careful, there's one column of pixels that it misses on the right edge. You might need to clear that up if you do something through that alpha channel. Anyway, so there is some transforming capabilities. You can do a selection transform alpha if you want that text to be smaller or bigger or rotated. Tons of different ways to work with that. And what I'd like to do really is now work with this mask. In fact, let's go back to the one without the transform. There you go, just as is, and do a couple of render this in a couple of ways. All right. So one thing we'll do, first of all, we'll store the image, and we'll also store the alpha. So let's go selection, store alpha. So we have a snapshot of that alpha channel here, that image. We can easily restore it. One thing we'll do is we'll experiment with putting a glow around it. Now that glow can be in the primary or in the secondary color. I think it's in the secondary. Anyway, we'll just experiment with that. Let's go to selection, and at the very bottom there are some effects. You can go alpha glow, and so now that one's probably not going to be the way we want it. It's probably going to be on the inside. Yeah, it's glowing with the primary color, but on the inside. So obviously we need to invert the alpha. Let's go undo this first, and then invert the alpha selection. There it is. And now we can go and put the glow on that. So selection, effects, alpha glow, give it a large amount of glow, and that's just adding a little bit. We can do that again and again a few times until we have a decent amount of glow. Now this is a dark glow. If you needed it a bright glow, you simply change the primary color there. All right, so let's do this a few times like that. Alpha glow, and just gradually get it to kind of glow to the dark. The inside now is something different. We could go and select a bright green and make sure it is fully saturated there, and use that as the primary color, and then simply select, clear the selection to the primary. But watch it, right now the selection is the thing on the outside. You don't want to clear that, so you need to select you need to invert the selection back to being on the inside. Now you can go and select the clear this to the inside. Now there's a couple of other effects you can do, and one of them I would recommend trying also is the embossing or even the shadow drop. So you can drop a shadow from that selection mask. Drop shadow, give it a try with a little bit more, a little bit less, invert it. That will actually preview it, and now you see it's on the inside, right? So if you don't want it on the inside, this actually looks pretty neat too, by the way. Let's apply that and clear the alpha and see what that does. So it gives it kind of a punched look, like it's carved or punched into the cardboard where that photograph lies, right? So it goes deep inside. That's an interesting effect. Let's go and restore the alpha here. That's why we have it stored, so we can simply click replace and put it back in there. Or we can undo until we also lose the drop shadow. What I'd like to do actually is now use the last one here, and that's the emboss by alpha. All right, so let's do that just with the default settings and click. So that gives you a little bit of an embossed look. Now you can also adjust that in different ways. One is you can do the selection and do the embossed look, but on a much smaller scale, much smaller amount. right? Or you can, after that, invert the selection, invert alpha, and apply it again. But then that will be on the other side. So let's go selection, embossed by alpha, maybe a large amount. So lots of different effects you get from that, right? Check this out, Control D to clear it. Now you have yet another combination of embossed look. Now one of my favorites really is to actually not color it in just a single way, but sort of a gradient. And that gradient might need to go from left to right, up, down, different directions. And we attempted to think of, we have to use the fill tool, and then we have to select the fill settings. There it is, fill settings, or down here, after selecting fill tools. And instead of a plain color, which is what we currently have here, we could go either select a pattern, do the pattern fill, and the pattern is actually the image currently in the custom brush. So this text that we had also loaded into the custom brush happens to be there too. It's very big though, we don't see it all. We could use that custom brush and store it, and then actually make it smaller right there until we start seeing it, right? And it's tiling it, and we can see it there all over. So we could possibly use that and do a pattern fill or a warp fill, or do a couple of different types of fillings here. And when you use the fill tool that way, as you fill in here, it will do all sorts of wacky stuff. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see the wackiness a little bit better here. And of course, it's probably not what you want, but it's a place where you can spend time, right? And experiment until you see something you do want. One of the problems, though, is that it's time consuming because you're going to do this for each letter individually. You're also probably going to need to increase the tolerance a little bit. Let's go and undo all of these and see if the tolerance is better. At some point, if you have the tolerance really high, it's going to ignore the alpha and just apply it all over, or not, right? So that shows you how much I know about this program. So let's see. I keep discovering everything every day here. This is really new. So what I really like to do, though, is instead of using the fill tool like that, I'm just going to use the gradient tool. This is the collection of gradients and lens flares here. So right-click on that. And you could, mind you, still with the fill tool, do something similar, which is to go here instead of the fill pattern using the gradients. So you could say, let's do a horizontal gradient. This is the gradients currently in use. You could change it to a different one. Let's take one of those here that look like some ground and then some sky. But we don't want it horizontal. Well, maybe we do. Let's see what that looks like. Well, see, that's the problem, is it fills it in one letter at a time. Let's first erase the content of that selection, because we got too much garbage in there right now. So let's make it all white. There you go. And now if I fill it, the problem is that, again, it's still only doing this on a per character basis. So each of those is going to be filled like that. Whereas if I go and set the tolerance to really high, then it's ignoring it and go all across there. Now that's still not what I want. I mean, it's good. It's a starting point, right? You could do the vertical way, and no, you want that entire gradient to fit vertically in there. So you know you're going to need to get that tolerance down a little bit and then work with that. But good luck getting them all at the same level, right? Some of the letters are bigger, some are smaller, and so this horizontal line is not going to show very even. It looks fairly decent, but it's just not perfect. And so let me show you how you can do that. Simply using the gradient tool rather than the fill tool in gradient mode, right? So when you right click on this, you remember you have the lens flares, the lightning, some nova options with different star counts and sizes. There's a warp tool. Well, here it is also the linear gradient tool. That's actually the first one. There's a circular gradient tool. Let's ignore that. So right now let's go to the linear gradient tool. And what that does is it lets you fill a gradient. In fact, let me show it to you. If you didn't have that alpha selection mask, it would do damage, right? I mean, it would apply that gradient right there. Okay. So what I'll do, undo this. We have the selection. What I'll do is I'll use that to fill my gradient, for instance, from here to here, and there I can adjust exactly if I want it vertically or a little bit at an angle, how high I want it, and that's really the beauty of it. That's what I wanted to get to. Now if I wanted to start lower, or have the top part black. I don't have to start from the outside of the letters. I can be right on the edge here, or I can go to even on the inside. Right, do something like that and see only parts of the gradient. And mind you, the gradient right now is fully opaque. But so if I do something like this here and then I go in this direction, it totally replaces everything that's in there. But if I wanted to, I could go to the gradient, the sweep editor here, and add some transparency or modulate, reduce the opacity at the edges where the blackness is. I could go down to 0 opacity, and same on the other end, and smooth this a little bit perhaps. And so as I'm doing that, now I have the opacity go down to 0 at the end, so it's actually not going to enforce that last color, the black color. You can see that it's leaving some things unchanged if they are outside of that opaque part. And so that's another way to actually create even more sophisticated gradients, because you can now focus on, let's say you want the D to kind of appear really bright, and then you want the ER to also show a bit of whiteness there. So you can do the gradients the way you want them. You can have some of it horizontal, some of that vertical or wacky like, or I don't know if that's a word, but that's the thing about it. You can go with the opacity and do a lot more than what the original sweep editor gradient had here. So, but let's go back to what probably we will use most of the time, is a little bit of ground color at the bottom, and then the trick is really just to be somewhat level, and you get better control of that if you zoom in. You don't have to see it all, really. You get a fairly good sense of whether it's there or not, and then you might still need to try a little bit. Probably better with a mouse than with a tablet, because the tablet will be a little bit of jittery, or well, maybe not. That's really where you'll find your niche. So here it is. That's one way. Let's do a few others. Maybe something like this is what we seek. And so that's the coloring that I like with the gradient. I still want to add also a shadow drop, or like I did earlier here, the glow on the outside. I want to do a glow that's bright. So let's go invert the selection again. Oh, and no, actually I might want to do something else first, and that is to add a border around it. Right. So right now, if I clear the selection here, you can see that there is just that text, and that's about it. But I want to add perhaps, and we have a little bit of something else that's showing here because of the embossing we did earlier. But one thing I'd like to do actually is to show sort of a black or a white filled border of 2 or 3 pixels thickness. I might even want to take the same gradient but in the opposite direction. That will kind of guarantee that not totally guarantee, but it will make it very likely that we will be able to read the text quite nicely, and the border will have a really interesting appearance too. So how do we make a border around that? Well, one way to think of it is that we make the selection bigger, we enhance it, or we grow the selection, and then we subtract that original selection. Remember, this is the original selection here that we stored, and if we replace it, boom, it's still there. Now I'm going to go to the selection and say store grow alpha, right? Make it a little bit bigger by 2 or 3, 4 pixels, and you can see that it has grown a nice wider zone around it of that selection. And I'm going to store that. That's a good one to have stored, and then see them side by side and think about what we want to do. So this one here you can replace, and that's the one we currently have here. And what we want to do is subtract this one, right? So this one here is what actually is loaded. When we go here and say subtract, we'll take the inner part that's from this image here, take that away. So this part is now also not selected. Outside, not selected. Inside, not selected. But in between, that's where the gray is still showing its original color. The pixels are still selected. And if you don't believe it, one thing I recommend you do, you go store this alpha and review it in a little bit bigger. They grab the corner, and you can see indeed it now has the edges around it, and that's all it has. So one thing you could do now is simply go and erase that to black, right? Right click to erase to primary, to whatever color you like. Erase to black, erase to white. What I'd like to do actually is use that same gradient fill tool one more time, with the linear gradient. But this time, instead of going up from top down, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. So the colors will be kind of different. And I don't even have to show the entire gradient. I might want to have everything kind of lighten up a little bit, but that's really up to your preference, right? So here is that final appearance. Let's go clear the alpha so we can see it as is, and there it is, beautiful. One more thing I'd like to do is perhaps drop that shadow again, so I'm going to go replace this one that selects everything and use that option here to affect drop shadow. And again, the preview here will tell us if it's on the inside or on the outside. Looks like this is good. Let's go like that and make it a little bit more fuzzy, a little bit more opaque, and okay that. And so when we clear this now, we have a beautiful text that I think we can be proud of. Of course, there's always more. We might want to do a little starry, shiny stuff, maybe do a little bit of glow, light diffusion, that sort of things. But anyway, that's outside of this tutorial. I wanted to show you how to do this, and that we did. Well, thanks for watching.